Bumper to bumper back on the Fan KFAN Midwave Pressbox. The feedback line is starting to abate a little bit. Our guests, Kurt Rambis, new head coach, Minnesota Timberwolves, and, of course, the man who hired him, David Kahn, who sucked it up today, which we appreciate because he's battling a bit of a flu bug, and I know that can be a bit on the painful side, so we appreciate you making your way over here anyway. Your guy, Rubio. The Bill Simmons theory is, and you've heard it, it's that we wouldn't even be, he'd already be here if not for the fact that you drafted Flynn, that he didn't want to compete against Flynn, it made no sense for him to compete against Flynn, and that if you had drafted Curry or any number of other options, that he would already be here, and as a result, he's not coming now, and he's not ever going to come, and he's bitter. Your thoughts?
Well, first of all, let me say this, and I mean this sincerely. I read Bill's column from time to time, and he's very talented.
He wanted your job. You know that, right? Half seriously, half...
There are certain days where I want his job.
Yeah, I'm sure that's true.
This being one of them.
Yeah.
He has it completely backwards in one respect, and he should talk to Dan Fagan, Ricky's agent. The night of the draft, when Ricky fell to us, right before the draft, Dan Fagan called and said, you know, I talked to Ricky's mother. The whole family was at the draft. It's a very close-knit family. And the mother was relieved to hear when I told them, we'll wait a year, meaning no pressure. You know, he's 18. We get it. We have 2 picks, 5 and 6. We'll wait a year. And the mother was thrilled. The only reason Ricky considered coming this year at the end of the day was Johnny Flynn. And the reason is that Ricky is, first of all, very sure of himself, very confident, and he knew that if Johnny had a couple years head start on him now, that in effect he might end up having to come in as a backup point guard, because he's not playing this card like it's I won't play in Minnesota at all. Ricky wants to play basketball. He wants to play in the NBA, and my interactions with him and his family this summer have all been really positive. In fact, I just shared a couple of texts with him this week congratulating him. He was the starting point guard for the Spanish national team that just won the European Championships. And, you know, Dan was Dan Fagan's a tough agent, but he was very complimentary during the summer. We really forced their hand when we took Flynn, because the plan wasn't to have Ricky come unless Ricky was in the top 3 picks. In his Nike contract, it calls for him to make more money if he had been picked in the top 3. And, of course, if he had been picked 2, as many of the mock drafts suggested, he would have made a lot more money under the rookie scale. So the only reason we really were able to take it as far as we did was because we drafted Johnny Flynn. So he has it actually backwards.
Now, on another ESPN person, I can't remember his name, it might have been Chris Sheridan, I don't recall, speculated that based on the way salary caps work or contracts work in the NBA, that the most advantageous thing that Rubio can do financially is sit 3 years, not 2. In other words, actually spend 3 years over there, because it would free him from a contract standpoint. Is that accurate? And do you concern yourself with that possibility that it's that far out? Because I can't believe you want him not here that long.
It's accurate only the standpoint if the labor deal contains the same rule. One of the things that everybody keeps missing about that point, it's accurate under the current labor deal. The thing is, in 2 years, we will have a new labor deal, in which case that rule may be moot. And by the way, our owner, Glenn Taylor, just happens to be the chair of the Board of Governors, just happens to be on the Labor Committee. I have a feeling that through my dealings with Glenn, any rules involving Ricky Rubio in the next labor deal, I have a feeling are going to be fairly advantageous to the Minnesota Timberwolves. So the whole notion that this thing 3 years hence is what is in his interest only would matter if the same rule was contained in the new labor agreement, which comes up in 2 years. So it's a moot point.
Can you honestly say that if you had to do it all over again, based on how complicated this thing has been and how, you went over there, I don't know how many times, and what you had to deal with, can you honestly say that if you knew draft night that it was this complicated, that you still would take him?
Absolutely. Think of the fact that we've just spent the last 5 or 6 minutes talking about a player who hasn't played 1 minute in the NBA yet. The buzz surrounding this player continues to grow almost by the day. And whether you like it or not, he just started at the age of 18 for the best team in Europe, the Spanish national team, and just helped get them, a gold medal in the European Championships. Ricky will continue to grow both physically and from a basketball standpoint. He's playing for arguably one of the best European teams in Barcelona with Juan Carlos Navarro and some other very fine players. This can't go wrong for us. I mean, that's the thing that just seems so obvious to me. It can't go wrong. Two things are going to happen. 2 years from now, Ricky Rubio will be wearing a Minnesota Timberwolves uniform and be a member of our backcourt playing here for us under Kurt's leadership. Or we as an organization will make a determination that our backcourt is set, that our chemistry is fixed in the backcourt, we're covered there, in which case we will choose to trade Ricky. Now, every time I say that, I immediately come right back with, but I really don't want to trade him at all. I am very hopeful that this emanates in a way that he wears a Minnesota Timberwolves uniform in 2 years. But like all of our players, I can't make that promise. Al Jefferson's our best player right now. He was traded here. So, that's the nature of this business. And there is a natural tension because it's a team sport that's based on chemistry, intangibles, teamwork, camaraderie, and yet at the end of the day, trades and free agency is also a part of the business.
Kurt, I want to give you a chance just to talk about this. I don't want to call it a soap opera, but it's an unusual situation. This is a team that obviously is in the very early developmental stages again. Nobody expects the club to compete for a title or even a playoff berth realistically this season. Coaches usually have a harder time, though, thinking long term, than GMs do. What's your view of this process and having to wait it out to sort of see where it goes?
You talking about Ricky Rubio?
Well, it's kind of both, I guess.
I told David when the situation with Ricky, we were talking on the phone when David was in Spain. I sat down and I was talking with some of my assistant coaches, and we figured that you could make as strong an argument that it would be better for him to stay over in Europe as you could equally as strong for him coming over here. So whatever happened, was going to happen for the best case scenario for us. So I just felt like I wanted to take some pressure, not that David was feeling pressure, but from a coaching standpoint, I could see where it would work out equally as well, whatever, decision Ricky ended up having. But in talking with David in our interview process, it was terrific for me to understand that he understood that this is going to be a process, that it wasn't going to happen overnight, and in order to develop this team and put them in a place where they are secure enough to get into the playoff and win playoff games, it was going to take time. And he was okay with that. He understood that from a basketball perspective. And that was one of the elements that made, accepting this job very intriguing.
Dan, let me just say,
sure.
Let me just interject, not that I need to be defensive, but the other thing is we live in such a culture of immediacy these days. The fact remains that in our sport, I could list right now 5 or 6 examples of European players who stayed overseas for 2 or 3 years and came back and still became proven NBA stars who were not 18, who in many cases when they were drafted were 21, 22, 23. Stojakovic, Sabonis, Petrovic, all those teams waited. And in Portland's case, they waited 9 years for Sabonis, which is a shame because I remember when they drafted Sabonis before he hurt his foot. Sabonis, if he had come without the injury, might have gone down in history as one of the greatest centers to ever play this game. He was tremendous. And even with the bad foot, he was a very significant player for them for a good 5 or 6 years. So history, if history is any kind of judge, this is not that big of a deal. In fact, as Kurt just said, I'm not saying that we're happy about it, but I don't see how anybody in the world could know. It's going to take 5 or 7 years for this to play out and for us to be able to look back on this with some perspective as to what this really meant to us.